will first just say good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for being here. Before we start, I would like to introduce some individuals that's with me. First, I would like to introduce our district attorney, Mr. Jeff Marcicla. My executive staff, Captain Fagans, he's my captain over the Special Operations Division. I have Captain Seabreeze, he's over investigations. And then Captain Ron Hepler, who is my captain over administrative services. As what already has been said, we've had 2 incidents of the last couple of days, and we do want to give an update on the child death investigation that we started yesterday. I'm going to read the press release, taking that some of you may not have received that, but hopefully you did. But on February 9th at 10:33 a.m., the Rocky Mount Police Department responded to the 2200 block of Hurt Drive to assist EMS reference to an unresponsive child. Preliminary investigation has determined that the victim was a 4-year-old boy. The victim was transported to UNC Health Nash and pronounced dead at that time. Officers and investigators are currently on scene at that time investigating the incident. Today, we report that the mother, Tiffany Henderson, 35, was at home with the child when officers arrived. Henderson had injuries that required medical attention. She was taken to UNC Nash for that treatment. Our investigators are still working that investigation to help us determine the cause of death. There will be an autopsy for the investigators to review at a later time. That update is all that I can provide on that at this moment, and hopefully as that investigation progresses, we'll have future updates as they develop. Moving to the officer-involved shooting, I want to start off by saying kind of how investigations involving an officer progresses. First, there are 2 investigations that go on simultaneously and they're parallel with each other. You have a criminal investigation, then you have an administrative investigation. As per our policy and as a standard practice, the SBI was called to lead the criminal investigation. The administrative investigation is ran by my office and my professional standards team, and they will look at it from the administrative standpoint. Those 2 investigations run parallel, but we ensure they do not interfere with each other. I also want to start by saying that I want to give you kind of a timeline of events, how they unfolded that got to the actual officer-involved shooting. And we'll start first. While officers were investigating the child death, later we received an alert from our Fusus camera system. Our Fusus camera system is a series of cameras and license plate readers throughout the city, where we received an alert at 12:37 p.m. It alerted that there was a stolen car in the vicinity of North Wesleyan Boulevard. Later, there was another alert at 12:54, and officers responded to the area to try to attempt to locate that stolen vehicle. I will report that the vehicle was stolen from Whitakers, North Carolina. It was reported stolen on February the 8th. It was reported to their police department. But at 12:54, the vehicle was observed by an officer on that Benaview Road area. Next. At 1 o'clock, there was another alert because at 12:54, officers lost sight of that vehicle, but then another alert came in at 1 p.m. on Church Street. Then at 1:14 p.m., it was alerted over the North Fairview Road area. At that time, the officers received those additional alerts. We located, quickly identified and located that vehicle, which gets us to 115, where it was located on Carolina Avenue. At that time, without incident, the driver of that vehicle was detained, and that is where the investigation continued in reference to the stolen vehicle. Based off information that had been obtained from the officers, we proceeded with information we had retrieved to Oakwood Shopping Center at 1:40 p.m. While at 1:40 p.m., next slide, officers was looking for the suspect in this case, which was Mr. Antonio Wilkins Sr. They made contact with him at 1:40 p.m. while there at the Oakwood Shopping Center. Next slide. While attempting to detain him, he fled, and at 1:44 p.m., as you can see on the chart there on the screen, or the layout of Oakwood Shopping Center, the red circle is at 1:40 where the officers checked out there, then made contact between 1:40 approximately to that 1:44 time frame. Then in the back where you see the black circle is where the officer-involved shooting actually occurred. I want to just make sure we're clear on some aspects or some more details on that particular time frame. When officers caught up with Wilkins behind the shopping center, a struggle ensued. During the struggle, Wilkins Sr. produced a handgun and fired rounds at approximately that 1:44 time frame. One of the rounds struck the holster duty weapon of one of the officers. The second officer on the scene returned fire, striking Wilkins in the leg. The officers whose weapon was struck by the round suffered minor injuries, and he was treated there on the scene for those injuries. After being shot, Wilkins immediately went to the ground, and officers began to render aid. Emergency service personnel arrived on the scene at approximately 1:52. They provided aid to Mr. Wilkins, then transported him to UNC Health here in Rocky Mount, and he was later flown to ECU Health Medical Center in Greenville for further treatment. He is currently, as has been reported to me, in stable condition. I will also note that immediately per our policy, around 2:05, I did notify the SBI, which is our procedures, to notify them of an officer-involved shooting, to have them notified, and they then spun up the agents to respond to our location. I would also just want to note that while on the scene, I made contact with both our sheriff's offices to brief our sheriffs on what we had going on in the city. Both sheriffs immediately offered assistance to the Rocky Mount Police Department as usual. We worked very well together in that aspect. Also would like to thank the Highway Patrol who responded to our location to offer us assistance as well. As you know, a lot was going on at that moment, so ensuring that we deal with that situation, but at the same time, be able to deal with any other calls that may come out in the city, it's important to have that manpower. I will just reiterate again, we did contact, per the Rocky Mount policy, the SBI was contacted and asked to investigate the shooting. Members of our agency arrived on the scene. Of course, they began their investigation. I will say there are some charges I would like to update you on. Mr. Antonio Wilkins Sr. has been charged with, or pending, he will be charged upon release from the hospital, but attempted first-degree murder, possession of a firearm by felon, assault with a deadly weapon with intent to kill, and possession of a stolen vehicle. With that, this includes at least my remarks. I will entertain some questions, but I would like to just also say, of course, a situation like this, I am thankful that everyone was able to, my officers and all, was able to walk away from this situation. I will also just say this is a reminder of the dangers in law enforcement. And I ask all to keep my officers and my agency in prayer, because you can only imagine the two officers involved with this, what they're going through. Per our policy, they have been placed on administrative leave, and to give them time to decompress from what had just happened. We have contacted, I will also report, as standard for our agency, counselors to be there for those officers involved, but also the other members of the Rocky Mount Police Department, sworn, non-sworn, and our telecommunications staff. With that, I will entertain a few questions, and I will answer it if I can, all questions. I just want to remind everyone that this is still an active investigation, so there may be some things I can't discuss. And one question, I'm sorry, I was reminded. We do have body cam video. I know there'll be one question coming up. The Rocky Mount Police Department is one of the first in this area to have had body cameras. Both officers in this situation did have body cam video, body cameras, and they were activated, and those video footages have been turned over to the SBI. With that, Mr. Josh.
Okay, so just, I know that there's probably not a ton you can elaborate on, but here at 115, you said that someone, you found the stolen vehicle, occupant was detained and questioned, person was released after further investigation, and then you have about 25 minutes later that you encountered the suspect in the parking lot. Are we to believe that the suspect was in the car, that the suspect had, because it sounds like everything was contained, and then I'm trying to fill in the gaps here as to how we get from 115 to 140 and you're tracking Mr. Wilkins.
115, there was a person in the vehicle, the driver of that vehicle. They were interviewed, and through the investigation, it led us to Mr. Antonio Wilkins Sr., which was at the Oakwood Shopping Center. He was not in the vehicle at the time we stopped it.
Gotcha, but you then believed him to be the person responsible for stealing the car in Whitaker's?
No, sir. We believe he is the one who had possession of that vehicle. At some point, we initially first came in contact with that vehicle. With the first alert, officers saw the vehicle, then we lost sight of that vehicle, then we picked the vehicle back up on Carolina Avenue.
Anything else about Mr. Wilkins you can tell us? Any past run-ins with law enforcement or anything about his criminal record?
Yes, sir. There have been some previous charges on Mr. Wilkins Sr. Just listing a few. Felonious possession of cocaine back in '96, misdemeanor injury to real property in 2007, misdemeanor break and enter in 2007, misdemeanor larceny 2007, for fictitious information to officer 2016, misdemeanor possession of marijuana 2016, and then larceny of, from a person in 2019.
Chief, in the case of the child, it's mentioned that that we're still trying to get more information, an autopsy perhaps, but also that the officers noticed injuries. Can you speak to what the obvious injuries were to that child?
No, sir. That investigation is still ongoing. It will be not appropriate to mention anything the officers observed, but we are waiting on the autopsy to give us further insight on that. Yes.
Two questions, one about the officer involved shooting and one about the child death. Were there security or surveillance cameras in place in an operation at the shopping center, and did that camera system, if there was one, pick up any footage of use to you? And also, were there, and I believe the one that hurt was at Hampton Village Apartments, if I'm right, and were there any cameras outdoors or maybe in the apartment that may have picked up anything of use or value?
First, on the child death investigation, I can't speak to if there was cameras in the area there or the home or any of that. I can't speak to that at this moment. In reference to the officer involved shooting, I do believe there are cameras that were in that area. Of course, in the course of the investigation with the SBI who is leading that, if that is determined there was cameras, they will be collected by the SBI. Did I answer that?
Right, and did you fire firearms on the premises of the shopping center? If so, where and whose were they?
If we would go back to that slide, please.
And how many bullets may have been recovered, spent or unspent?
Just going to pull both dots, both circles up, please. Okay, at 1:40 is when my officer in the red circle, when they arrived at the Oakwood Shopping Center due to this motor vehicle, the stolen motor vehicle investigation. Between 1:40, and I'm giving approximate times here, I just want to make sure approximate times, between 1:40 to when he made contact with him, Mr. Wilkins, then there was a short, tried to detain him, he fled, and then in the area behind the shopping center where you see the black circle, that is where approximately 1:44 is where the shots were fired. He fired shots first, so there was gun exchange, and the officer exchanged fire back, striking him at least once in the leg. just for clarity also, between where we initially made contact in the front side of the shopping center, there's a breezeway there. Those who are from Rocky Mountain know the shopping center well. There's like a walkway to go from the front side to the back side of the shopping center where the incident occurred. That is where he ran through the breezeway, and then where the black circle is indicated where the gunfire exchange happened.
You mentioned that there was body cameras that were actively involved in this. Is there going to be a request on the part of the police department to have that released?
I have not received any requests. At this moment, the body cam video has been turned over to the SBI for their investigative purposes. There is no intent to release that body cam video at this time.
Can you speak to, and I don't know if this gentleman here asked how many rounds were fired? I mean, we saw 30 evidence markers or so. I know I asked one of your deputies, like, how many shots or we think got off, and were there any kids outside? It seems like there's like a daycare right there, so certainly, a dangerous situation, not just for the kids, but for anyone walking around that shopping center.
It does butt up against a residential area. I'm not aware of any kids that was there at the time of the shooting. I can't speak to that. There was more than one shot fired by the suspect, which was first, and then our officer returned fire, and there was more than one shot fired by our officer.
And that was one of my concerns. Not only was it in the shopping center, my question, so it did initially start in the front. Eastern Avenue is right behind the shopping center, and there are residential areas as well as a convenience store. So there was a lot of activity. So there was extra concern about not only the residents who live there, but also the fact that the convenience store is very active as well. So you clarified that the shooting actually occurred on the backside, which is closer to the residential area, and that was a concern that I had. Even though the person fired first, there were houses that were right across the street in the area as well. So in that case, it was an extra situation to have three critical locations: daycare, shopping center, residential, and convenience store. So the fact that we're inquiring about how many shots were fired, that was important to know, especially during that time of the day.
You know, the number of shots fired will come out in the investigation by the SBI. I would not be prepared to report to you how many shots were fired, but I am saying that the suspect fired more than one shot first at our officer. He was struck. It appears that it struck a piece of his equipment. He did sustain minor injury. Then another officer returned fire, where he was struck at least once in the leg, and immediately after he was struck, an officer rendered aid. Then first responders arrived on the scene immediately shortly after, and they rendered aid, where he was eventually transported to Nash and then eventually to Greenville. Yes, ma'am.
Can you clarify which officer was struck, and then which one shot back?
I'm not going to say which officer was struck, which officer fired. I will say that Sergeant C. Joyner, a 15-year veteran of the Rocky Mountain Police Department, was involved in this incident. He is currently assigned to criminal investigations, where he is a sergeant over the major crimes unit. The second officer is Corporal Hussey. She is also a 15-year veteran of the Rocky Mountain Police Department, and she's currently assigned to patrol services.
And both are wearing body cams at the time?
Yes, sir, they were.
Can you clarify, I'm still not clear on how this, stolen vehicle comes into contact with, Mr. Wilkins Sr., because do you believe that he at one point stole the car and then left the car, gave it to somebody else, and they were driving? I'm just trying to, in layman's terms, understand how they're connected.
Through the course of that investigation, we determined he had possession of that car. We were seeking his whereabouts. We found him at the Oakwood Shopping Center, where we went to go speak with him about this investigation, where he then ran, and then upon us making contact again with him behind the shopping center is where the officer-involved shooting occurred.
Will you be releasing the name of the child, and if so, when?
Releasing the name of the child, no, sir, because of course it was a child, so I do not have any intention to release the name of the child.
Did the mother call 911?
I can't speak to that at this moment, but I can find out later. Yes, sir.
We'll take one more question.
Can Mr. Mr. Marsigli elaborate where his office would be involved in this, if you would like to speak to that, or where he would come into play in this investigation, and what he would be tasked with doing?
I'll let you know, our part is to wait for the SBI investigation to complete and then review that investigation and determine if any criminal liability is appropriate.
So it would be your decision of whether to give it to a grand jury for prosecution?
Yeah, we're talking about two different things, so yes, all the criminal charges against the defendant and the investigation into the officer-involved shooting.
Right, but you'd be the person to make the decision.
That's correct, yes.
That's right. Thank you.
And I want to just add to that, we did notify the district attorney's office, of course, once this occurred as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Can we get that PowerPoint emailed to us?
I know, I was thinking the same thing.
Yes, I think we can get a version of it to you. We can definitely do that.
Those are good graphics, yeah.
Well, we have a good marketing team.
I know who this guy is, but I want to see who this guy is right here.
All right, perfect. Mark that down.